A pleasure to me all at last, and welcome back once again to basically a whole series worth of well-known pop culture franchises. The third of which that I have going on for today is going to be set around a certain Bruce Willis series that might as well be talked about now because we know that Bruce Willis himself hasn't really been himself as of 2022. So let's just go on ahead and talk a bit about the Die Hard series for number 2906. The Die Hard series was a well-known film series that ran from 1988, with the first film coming out that year, all the way to 2013, in which that a fifth film of the franchise, known as A Good Day to Die Hard, would come out. There, of course, would be three other films that would center around the franchise just as well. 1990's Die Hard 2, 1995's Die Hard with a Vengeance, and 2007's Live Free or Die Hard. So, with all five of these films, there's going to be a lot to talk about here. But for the most part, Bruce Willis, of course, is the well-known police detective, somewhat undercover and not exactly in uniform, most of the time at least. But even when he is, in fact, in uniform, he finds himself in essentially a Californian-based setting, all the way from his own termini in New York, just so he could find his wife and wish her a Merry Christmas. The first film, as you probably know, takes place in a long, high-story building in which that John McClane's wife is set in. John McClane, of course, is the police detective whom, on an airplane, is told by a passenger to take off his shoes and socks, and when he does so, this evidently sets up the unique, difficult challenge for him that coincidentally comes his way, because once he makes it to the building that he is supposed to be in, a full squad of terrorists come into the building as well and hold the people hostage. They also cut down the phone lines and prevent anybody from going to make outside contact by hostage situation inside of one particular room in the building. So basically, it's one crazy predicament. And the terrorists pretty much thought of everything. But John McClane, not knowing what's going on, initially doesn't really give much of a crap, because how could he? He doesn't really know all that much about it. But once he finally gets notion of it, he eventually goes as far to pick up one of their radios and contacts the police. This, of course, was at a time in which that 911 on a telephone was required in order for 911 to be dispatched. But even when a cop does make it to the building, McClane doesn't really have much of a solution other than dropping a dead body onto the car of said officer that went to investigate the disturbance. So this is what really brought up the attention of the police department, and they gather around the building and eventually cut off the power to the place, which, while it doesn't do all that much, it at least sets the stage for events to come. Hans Gruber, the man behind the operation and the terrorist plot itself, he sets out to find John McClane himself. But most importantly, McClane now is in just as much of a challenge as he's ever faced, because he's navigating through vents, picking up guns, taking down goons, and most importantly, navigating through broken glass while barefoot. So, if you think that that's crazy though, just wait until you see when he gets onto the roof, because at the same time that Gruber is after him, many of the police squads don't know that he is actually a cop. Most likely because he's out of uniform. And they start to shoot at him, but explosives start to go off. And when they do, McClane has a fire hose strapped to his waist as he rappels down the side of the building, crashes through a window, and narrowly manages to escape, falling to death. But even once he gets up to where he needs to go, he finds his wife being held hostage by Hans. A joke is exchanged between them because an earlier radio conversation did lead up to the famous quote known as "Yippee-ki-yay." So, when they have a laugh at it, McClane does pull out a secret weapon taped to his back. He's able to defeat Hans thanks to his wife wearing a watch and removing it. And well, that spelled movie history right there. Gruber fell all the way to the ground, but then one last jump scare shows up as a goon who was thought to be dead shows up again and is shot by, believe it or not, the same officer that was first contacted to investigate the disturbance. So, Carl Winslow, his actor, he played the same character here. So, that's what you call film history. Pure cinema at kind of its finest, because nowadays we have a lot of great stuff to talk about. This, of course, was just the beginning of it all. And it's important to note here that there actually were novels pretty much based on the likes of the films entirely. And these novels do, of course, consist of 3 different books that were published years before the movies even came out. There was The Detective in 1966, Nothing Lasts Forever in 1979, and of course, 1987's 58 Minutes. The main significance of all 3 of these novels is that 2 of which pertain to the plot and storyline of the first film, and the third actually is what sets us up for the events of the sequel, which came out 2 years later in 1990. And as 58 Minutes itself implies, there are a good 58 minutes that go on where a similar terrorist plot takes place, but instead of claiming a skyscraper, they claim an airport worth of planes. They shut the power down, preventing anybody from landing on the tarmac, and even allowing one plane to crash, killing a lot on board. But just like with the first film, John McClane, still played by Bruce Willis, has to deal with the same sort of nonsense as what we've seen before, but on a somewhat grander scale. And even when the terrorists make a run for it on snowmobiles and eventually to their own plane, John McClane utilizes a broken fuel line and a lighter to light up the fuel, which then traces all the way to the aircraft and blows it up spectacularly. And let me tell you, that was just as awesome as what the first film gave us. But I'd say blowing up all of the antagonists at once instead of having one guy fall to his death is even better. I mean, the scale is even higher here. Not only that, but it's pretty creative to break a fuel line open and then leave a big trail of fuel spilled on the tarmac, and when McClane is down and out, he takes his lighter out as one last act of defiance and lights up the fuel, turning the plane into a firework for him to watch from a safe distance. That is even better than what the first film did. So, what does the third film have to offer? Well, it's once again one guy basically playing a game of Simon Says. Simon, whom is actually the name of the terrorist in the third film, is, believe it or not, the brother of Hans Gruber. So, that's pretty impressive. I mean, get a lost relative of Hans Gruber around and create a revenge plot out of it. But the stakes in this instance are even higher because, on top of being suspended by the police, John McClane is forced to wear a sign that actually creates racial bigotry, and thankfully a man played by Samuel L. Jackson goes out to stop it from becoming a mess. And he eventually agrees to go alongside John McClane and help him out by ridding this third terrorist. I can't say it's in any ways better than what the other 2 films did, but it still does just as good for what it is. And as for films 4 and 5, I can't say all that much about those either, because I haven't really watched them, believe it or not. There was also talk about a 6th film, but has unfortunately been terminated, almost pre-production, so we're probably never going to have a 6th film in the Die Hard series anyways, because, let's face it, John McClane himself, Bruce Willis, has been suffering from some dementia as of 2022. So, on top of retiring from his acting career, we're probably not going to see much more from him ever again. And even if he does finally kick the bucket, whether it be from dementia or something else entirely, he'll always live on in our memories. So that's at least something worth noting. Either way, this was another pretty good franchise worth talking about here. And with 5 films to boot, plus 3 books that acted as source material for the first 2 films, that brings about a good amount of mileage. And I'm sure that if there's more down the line planned for the series, they could probably reboot the franchise if they want to. But they might have to introduce, let's say, a grandfather to John McClane. Whether that happens or not, though, we're at least going to come to the agreement that the films were good while they lasted, and it's good that they didn't bother milking it, unlike some franchises that we know, very well. In any case, though, that's all I got to say about Die Hard. So, this series was good while it lasted, but I have plenty more I could talk about just as well. So, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.